weirdly like, whenever I'm doing a podcast that is going out live or a stream or something, there is I do every Wednesday, I do an Instagram live chat with Liz Glazer, a good friend and comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And the way Instagram works, as you may be familiar, like when you go live, if you go live with somebody, one person starts it, and then the other person hopefully joins either immediately or whenever, and then they get invited but there's always like the first few seconds at least, the first up to a minute where I'm like, all right, hello, the thing that's about to happen, sort of like I've thought about transitions from asleep to awake is hard to go sometimes. From awake to asleep is hard to go sometimes. Like, I'm good at being awake and I'm good at being asleep. Like, I'm fortunate that way.
I'm bad at transitions in general, so I'm aware of them. I'm hyper aware of them.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
like when someone's like, okay, we got to leave right now. I really prefer if they give me like 5 minutes notice, because I don't handle those abrupt shifts.
Sure.
Well,
Do you mean from a party with a relationship partner, or?
yes, or a platonic partner, or anyone else. I like to not be yanked away. I don't like yanking. I like the Yankees. I don't like yanking. I don't like not knowing when and how I'm going somewhere. I like to be prepared, even if it's just like a few moments.
Sure. I wrote this joke about, I think so, the concept of the Irish goodbye, and as a Jewish fellow, I feel like the Jewish goodbye is making sure to say goodbye to everyone at the party and maybe actually not ending up leaving. Like, you start an hour later, somebody's like, I thought you said goodbye, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't get it to everyone yet.
Right. I thought there was something about like apologizing to people for leaving. Was that part of that joke?
Oh, that could have been. Yeah, I feel like in the past year, like when I've written jokes, told jokes, done jokes, the process by which I normally like listen back is like interrupted, because I usually do it sometimes when I'm driving, sometimes when I'm out walking, but it's just.
I'm a big fan of the subway.
Oh yeah.
I'm on my way to my next set. I always listen to my last set.
It very, a fine practice. And, but I do everything slightly differently now, such that there's some shows that I've done over the past year that I haven't listened back to, that people are like, remind me of, oh, remember this joke that you did there? And I'm like, oh yeah, that I should remember that one. And like, I have it recorded, but I have not yet, because I don't have the next show, like the next shows are not, like, I've mostly been using Zoom shows and online shows as more of like a riff laboratory, that, like sometimes I have new ideas that have become fleshed out, like some sort of online joke Zoom Frankenstein. But yeah, the process has been not interrupted, but shifted greatly for now, though I'm optimistic that I feel like it feels like I have 8 hours of new comedy to test out when live performing returns.
I know. It's really, I feel like it's sort of, there was always that thing like, oh, I have this idea for a bit. I can write it out and I can go on stage that night or the next night or sometime soon and try it out. And now oftentimes I find myself, I just have this list of things that I think are potentially good ideas for bits, but it's weird for me to have this backlog that I don't really know whether it's funny or not. Usually I'm pretty well aware of like, oh, I don't think that's working, or like this one's got potential. But like right now I just have like this, it's like a pile of laundry and I have no idea if any of it fits.
That I think that's funny. I think write that down. That's good. And yeah, I agree with you, though. Here's the positive flip side of it, I feel like, is because I have no idea, because if you've only tried things out on Zoom audiences or not at all, like, and you're like, I don't know which clothing is going to fit the best, which is going to smell the best, which is going to look the best. then I sort of get back to the roots of like, well, what do I like the best? Like, what do I want to talk about or focus on? Like, and it might I might end up like I think I've done like maybe 3 or 4 hour set, like different hour sets over the course of the last many months. A few for the Nowhere Comedy Club and one for Rush Ticks. And I like them all a lot. And like they were some combination of like I had a bunch of jokes planned and then I did a lot of riffing. And I aimed to have each of the 4 hours be mainly different. And one of them, the most recent one I did, was mostly about my grandmother who died last year, almost a year ago now. And I've got a lot of jokes and a lot of like memories and stories and things that she said that were funny. And like it might end up being that if I did that hour as it was like in a comedy club, maybe like, oh, well, some of these like jokes, like they're definitely there's funny stuff there, but it's it's not yet honed into a stand-up set, but it feels good doing it. The idea that not that I don't want my stand-up to be funny, but I'm like, I was talking to a minister friend, or no, actually it was Liz Glazer, and her wife is a rabbi, and as a rabbi, she writes things to perform, to present, and sometimes there's jokes in them.
I
And
feel like they
Liz
don't like
has a
the word
joke.
perform, do they?
What's that?
I feel like they wouldn't like the word perform, or am I wrong?
Uh, I think that I'll have to ask Liz again if she would use the word perform. But for sake of argument now, let's just for simplicities, we'll say to present, to speak. They are speaking
Sure.
With a purpose that is not unlike that of many comedians. To sometimes to get a point across, and sometimes to get a laugh. Like they definitely like will. And so Liz has a joke about how Karen, the rabbi, has it lucky because if a rabbi's joke doesn't land, they can always revert to just and we all say amen. Like, so it feels good for me to have comedy that also is not like that exactly, but to fall back on, well, at least it's the truth. At least it's real. At least it's important.
Or it's something I wanted to say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like if something's not funny and you don't mean it and it doesn't make sense, then and afterwards somebody's like, "Why did you say that?" I mean, I thought one of those would turn out.
Yeah, I mean, I have a line from an essay that I wrote, which is, to quote myself, which is always a questionable idea, but the worst thing you can do is sell out without selling anything.
Ah, yeah.
Which I feel like relates. It's like if you're going to sell out and you sell something, like that's one thing. If you just sold out and you didn't even get the thing you were trying to get, then you really kind of shot yourself in the asshole.
Oh yeah.
I don't know where to put that bullet, but
yeah. I remember at some point realizing the seemingly two different meanings of sellout. Like, oh, you don't want to be a sellout, but you do want to do the verb of sell out the theater that you're performing in. Like,
yeah, well, there's some famous Frontline episode about how people under the age of, I would say, 25 or so have no idea what the phrase selling out means. That, like, because I'm Gen X, and that was like a big deal. You didn't want to sell out, like screw the man, never give your song to some corporation to use in their ads. And now there's a whole generation that like the actual concept of selling out is not something they're familiar with, which I found fairly fascinating.
Here's two things about this. Number one, I read several years ago now, but sometime in our adulthood, that with the rise of YouTube stars, Vine stars, TikTok stars, that longitudinal study wise, it used to be if you asked teenagers 50 years ago, do you want to be famous, and you ask teenagers now, do you want to be famous, like proportionally more teenagers now want to be famous because they are I think ostensibly they're seeing that. Of course, it's not necessarily like a viable career path, but it wasn't even something 50 years ago. They didn't. You want to make your living by
the democratization of fame.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, somebody told me once about, I think, Johnny Rotten. He's still alive, I believe. And maybe 10 years ago, he was, from the Sex Pistols.
Yep.
Uh, they had music that was being used in a commercial, and somebody was interviewing him and was like, Sex Pistols music being used in a commercial? Not that punk, is it? And then his answer was, whatever we do is punk. So, also, I remember, I think my first shift from being the kind of person that you're talking about as well, like of our generation, I think we're about the same age, growing up in the 80s. I remember when David Cross was in Alvin and the Chipmunks, I
Yes.
think.
And that was him versus Patton Oswalt. Wasn't there some comedian battle around it of some sort?
I don't remember exactly, but I just remember thinking that David Cross was like, one of the coolest guys, and now here he was in one of the squarest things. But I like read an interview with him, and he was like, well, I want to live in a house and be able to afford it. And then even that you bring up Patton Oswalt, I mean, I feel like he was on The King of Queens, a very like a standard
I
sitcom.
I feel like we need to. I don't want to interrupt you, but I
Oh
feel like I
yeah.
have some semblance of where you're going, and I do feel like we need to differentiate between making a piece of lowbrow art that maybe is not as sophisticated as you are as an artist, versus actually shilling for like some multinational corporation that is presumably doing some evil things and using your talents in order to further their agenda. And I feel like those are qualitatively two different things.
Uh, I accept that. I guess I'll conclude this portion of what I'm saying and then ask you a question. But
Okay.
so my understanding is that Patton's stand up is wonderful. It is original. It is unique. It is his own. And in
Yep.
fact, I think that if I remember correctly, like some of the money that he got for being on a network sitcom, like he used to fund the comedians of comedy, a do it yourself
Yep.
underground, like him, Maria Bamford, Zach Galifianakis, Brian Posehn, like bringing the comedy to the masses in a way that he wouldn't have been able to afford if he was not paid the money from uh,
Sure.
whatever company it was. And I feel like, I mean, David Cross has also been over the years, like making stand up. I don't know what their personal finances all are. I don't know what the economics of their lives are. But I guess my question is, is there a difference in the difference that you're laying out, shilling for a corporation compared to making comedy that you wouldn't watch if you weren't a part of it? Like, are those two situations that different? That the movie that David Cross did and Patton Oswalt's TV
Well,
career?
yeah, I mean, I think let's make a spectrum, which is maybe on one end you have David Cross starring in Alvin and the Chipmunks or doing voiceover, right? He's not even like actually
Oh
appearing
no,
in
I
it.
think it was live
And,
action. I think he was really
oh,
in it.
was it? Okay.
I think so.
And then let's say David Cross did voiceover for a Halliburton commercial, you
Oh,
know,
it.
which would be like entirely against so much of what his art seemingly stands for.
Oh
In
yes.
which case, you would be like, well, now you have sacrificed your integrity and your ideals and everything you seemingly stand for, clearly just for a paycheck. And so, with those being two poles on a spectrum, then I think the question is where are we dialing in within that? And I'm fine. Like, I think actors sometimes, take like a superhero movie to cash a check, and that enables them maybe to make 3 independent movies that they couldn't make otherwise, and to do it for scale in a way that the movie wouldn't have gotten made if they hadn't done that. And is that justifiable? And I think it could be if they were like, selling out to, or if they were being used in a corporate advertisement in order to do that. I might question it a little bit more. Then you have a lot of these people will do that overseas, but not in America. They'll be on like some Japanese billboard somewhere, but they wouldn't do that in America because of how it impacts their reputation. So I guess I think it's a little bit of like a sliding scale. But I don't know. And also I feel like it is antiquated too, this notion of selling out, because now, that's like in terms of music anyway, that's how bands make money. They don't make them off album sales anymore. Right now they can't tour at all, but even then it's hard. And so like there was a band Rat-a-tat that had their song used in a Hummer commercial, and I remember thinking like, Yeah, good for those guys. They're making some money. Someone just bought a second home. Like, good for that dude. You know, in a way that like I think maybe when I was in my uh, post-collegiate idealistic period, I may have frowned upon a little bit more.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that I remember when like Bill Hicks was mad at or making jokes about Jay Leno for, doing Doritos commercials.
Yeah,
And I think in some ways, like it is a matter of scale, because I don't think that Bill Hicks was or would have. And I think I even like saw him talk about like if you were just starting out and you weren't making a living, then like so many comedians are auditioning for commercials, like along with pilots. And like I'm sure like most comedians don't want to make their living from doing commercials, but they do want to make their living acting and doing comedy and
or just
whatever it
make
is
a
they want
living.
to. Yeah. And so the question is same thing. I mean, assume for bands, like before you have enough money, then, do what you have to do. Like if you can sell your art to somebody who wants to buy it for whatever purpose. But then after you have enough, I feel like if there's going to be judgment, then it should be reserved for after somebody doesn't have to be doing what they're doing to live.
Yeah, enough is such a tricky word. I feel like enough. What is enough?
Ha. Well, $75,000 a year. My my grandmother.
I've read that study. I think it's a pretty good number. I don't know. It's sort of like I don't the people I know who do make significantly more than that. They don't seem significantly happier. It seems like maybe they have more options in their lives, but also some more rocky waters to navigate as well.
Oh yeah, Rocky Waters. That sounds like a good musician. Um, and here's the thing I would say is like, of course, like I'm not an authority. I'm not an expert. I also like I do my best to like have I have money coming in so I can live, so I can pay rent, so I can eat food, so I can put some away for savings. But I also know that every amount that every dollar that I save is also a dollar that I'm not like using to help somebody who needs that dollar now. And so it is like, sort of a balancing act of wanting to help people who need help now. And then
10%.
also, what's that?
10%.
For sure. I
Seventy-five
forget.
thousand, 10%. There's just clear rules. There's math. It's simple.
Have we talked about there's a book by Peter Singer called The
Oh
Life
yes,
You
we
Can
have.
Save?
We have. I know you're a big
Uh
fan.
oh sure. And in that at the end of that, he offers more of a like not just a flat tax of 10%, but a more like a brackets, like an income tax bracket kind of giving metric where
Mm,
it's like if you make $10 million a year, you could live on $7 million a year. So 30% at that point. If you make $1
okay.
million a year, then 10%. If you make 500,000 and then so forth, and under a certain amount, then you don't need to give at all because you're on the closer to the receiving end of the spectrum.
Yeah, so you should be asking a millionaire to give you 10%.
Oh yeah.
I
So
feel like my giving patterns are more guilt based than anything else. Guilt and shame, I think, are powerful motivators as well.
sure. Well, I do. So, since I read that book years ago, I do at the end of every year go to givewell.org, which is a, charity vetting site, and look at where they say that money can do the most good. And I
Yeah,
donate a percentage based on that. Like, I feel like I want to both. I mean, there's some feeling of being like, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to be an asshole. Like, I want to do the right thing. I want to be helpful. I want to be compassionate. And I know it seems weird to be like, so what is the robotic metric that'll help tell me how to be exactly compassionate enough? But it is helpful to know. I mean, also throughout the year when people are like, hey, what about this cause? What about this? Hey, can you donate to this thing and these people and this GoFundMe right now? And I'll do that as well and not include that in the year end metric. So it, I'm I was raised to like put money away for retirement, and to not hopefully not spend more than is coming in, which is I'm fortunate to have been able to get to a place where I could do that, to have jobs while doing comedy up until I didn't need a job other than comedy. It's some might say a blessing, certainly uh a good fortunate place to be, and so I do want to help others uh be able to do that as well.
Yeah, blessing. I feel like diminishes the amount of hard work that goes into that too. Though I
Mm.
feel like you've earned it. Like I guess you can earn a blessing, but
Ha.
in,
Earn your blessings, like Tim Minchin.
yes,
I'm a big fan, and he did like a graduation speech at a college that's online, and one of the things that he says to these graduating seniors is like, you are lucky. You're lucky that you were able to go to college. You're lucky that your parents could afford it or that you could afford it. You're lucky. And if you're like, no, it's not luck. I worked hard. He's like, well, you're lucky you were gifted with the environment that you did grow up in that led you to have that grit and have that scrap. You're lucky that you had the brain chemistry that enabled you to, make the decisions that you did. Like, if you're thinking about in this lifetime only, we didn't choose where and how to be born under those circumstances. So he's like, there's always some amount of fortune, some amount of luck. And I'm not saying only, of course,
sure.
there's what you do with it as well.
Well, it's interesting because that reminds me of I'm fascinated by how much almost universally people dislike adults who grew up completely pampered and spoiled and never had anything bad happen to them in their lives, and yet how every parent's goal is to try to raise a child where nothing bad happens to them in their lives. And it's sort of like, perhaps it's an impossible task, so that's why the effort is admirable. But on some level, are we getting, and neither one of us has kids, so who are we to judge? But like, our parents being, sort of overly desirous of some sort of like perfect bubble upbringing when maybe when quote unquote bad things happen to your kid, that's the sort of stuff that makes people interesting as grown-ups and able to kind of endure the challenges that inevitably arise.
Oh, sure. Like, I mean, as an analogy to, like, if you live in a pristine, germ-free environment, you will be later in life susceptible to your immune system won't develop in the way that it has evolved to by learning
Yeah,
how to defend itself from like specific microbes that wouldn't kill you but help make you stronger. And I think that there probably are parents out there who, I think, like, on the extreme, I think what you're talking about exists. There are some people that want to protect their children from everything to the point that they are not inoculating them against what life might throw at them. But I think that there are, like, I remember hearing some parents talk about how they don't want to get their kids things. They'd rather purchase their kids experiences, like, so that they have memories, so that they have stories, so that it isn't just because things go away. I mean, also everything goes away, but
yeah,
of course there's like, I mean, I've talked to my mom recently about like her upbringing and the way that she is raising me differently than she was raised. Uh and like her mother was like physically abused, and then didn't and fixed that part. And then, my mom had whatever challenges she did have with her parents, like perhaps her father might have been more authoritarian than to her liking. And so she specifically for me told me she took these parent effectiveness training classes, which focused on being an authority without being an authoritarian. And
that's a good line.
oh yeah. I mean, I am grateful. It's funny. My mom said to me the other
Maybe
day,
we
she's
should
like,
write a parenting book.
sure.
Wouldn't that be good? Two guys who don't have any kids writing a parenting book.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, here's the thing. I mean, like, one reason why, I mean, it's not this simple, but I'm like, oh, like, we're just every parent is trying to do better than than their parent. They're trying to take what
Yep.
worked for their parents on them and then find the thing, oh, these things didn't work, let me do those another way. And I'm like, we've hacked the system. We're like taking everything that was good and just keeping it, and then we're not going to screw up any kids.
Yeah, since you were talking about stuff versus experiences, one of one of my experiences around stuff during the pandemic was Marie Kondoing, reading that Marie Kondo book, uh, and Marie Kondoing my apartment. And are you familiar with the whole? This is the life-changing magic of tidying up, and
Oh, I certainly am.
but you throw out anything that doesn't spark joy for our thousands of viewers out there who might not know about it. And what I've found interesting about it is how much it changes your relationships to stuff and possessions, and not just the things that you own and throwing them out, but also what you will allow into your space after that. After you've gone through that sort of purging and like kind of making everything earn its keep and being like, do you spark joy? If not, I'm getting rid of you. Now it totally changes the whole notion of like what clothes you might buy moving forward. Becomes a very different equation in a way that has been interesting to me, how it's this sort of modal shift of like, oh, this is now what this system has really done is made me question any new object or possession or piece of clothing that I would bring into my living environment.
Also, every once in a while, like I'm taking in a piece of art, be it, a TV show, a movie, music, or a book. And like sometimes I'm just like, oh yeah, like it really, like a key in a lock, just like this artist knows what they're doing, like, and this is like for me, like it's like my ideal flavor or resonance. And at those moments sometimes I'm like, why do I experience things that aren't this? There is so much of this. And I mean, I do feel like I watch TV differently now than I used to. I used to, like, there was a time in high school that I watched like from 6 p.m. to midnight, just like, reruns. I mean, some of it was like reruns of good shows,
We didn't have a
Cheers and
choice back then.
Night
We
Court.
didn't have these infinite options.
That's true. You're right.
But
I let myself off the hook.
I wind up in a similar, like my girlfriend and I, like she'll just kind of like flip through Netflix and like look at something and be like, oh, that looks like it could be interesting, and start watching. And that to me is like this mind-blowing concept. Like, you don't even, no one recommended this show to you. Did you read some critic who said it was going to be good? You're just going to take whatever Netflix flings at you and consume it. And in her defense, her point is like, oh, you can only watch something that's been, check marked by like the intelligentsia or like, some New York Times critic or something like that. Like, which I still think I'm right because I'm me. But like, yeah, I just don't want to waste time. I do think like a lot of stuff on Netflix or Hulu is crap, and to just sort of like passively accept whatever they're throwing at me as like, this is the new thing that you're supposed to be excited by. It kind of makes me feel icky. And so I'd rather like choose something that some person I trust has recommended to me, or hopefully multiple people have, before I invest, that kind of energy into it.
I understand. I think it's another spectrum, and either extreme, like if you only just go through life without, vetting or asking anybody else for their experience or their thoughts, then you are missing out in one way. And if you're only, you don't want to waste time. Some people, I remember reading this advice column somebody wrote in, and they were like, I just want to go out to dinner sometimes. And I'm like, let's go to this new Thai place. And then my husband's like, let me do some research. And then he spends so much time doing research to figure out, let's go to the best Thai place. Let's not just pick, well, because what if that one isn't even good? And like, the advice was like somewhere in the, like maybe research 3 or 4, and pick the best of the ones that are nearby, rather than, because if you spend all of your time trying to.
I had a friend who would look at a restaurant menu. The first dish that he saw, he's like, "Oh, I'd be all right with that." He'd put down the menu, wouldn't look at the rest. Too many options. He's like, "I saw something that I'm okay with. I'm done. I'm out." Which I think is a little bit much. I don't know. Like and I totally get your point, and overall, I think you're probably right. But like, also, I feel like sometimes, like, what's wrong with being a snob? I don't know. I feel like elitists get like a bad rap nowadays. But what's wrong? I just like things that are good. I don't want to consume things that are bad. I'm gonna die. I have a limited time on this planet. Like I'm going to triage this fire hose of bullshit coming at me all the time. So I only consume things that are good, because also it's like, to me, it's like if you are someone who's creating stuff too, what you input is what you output. And if you're just inputting a bunch of crap, like I think it heightens the odds that you're going to produce crap. And so I'd rather watch stuff and consume things and read things that are like really well done, and be someone who's like knows that kind of stuff and likes it. And I feel like it's weirdly become some frowned upon thing to feel that way.
To be clear, I also mostly only take in media, art, entertainment when I have received like a positive either, like, used to be you see a preview for a movie while you're seeing another movie, like, oh, that looks good, oh, it's made by somebody I like, oh, it has somebody in it that I like I'm not usually going into experiences like sight unseen as well, but I think that uh in the example of the guy, like, I'm not saying that you're the guy who spends an hour trying to figure out what Thai restaurant to go to. But like the more time you do that, like you want to take in good things. At a certain point, you're only taking in reviews of things into trying to decide.
I'm a big fan of the time box. I might do that, but I'm going to be like 5 minutes tops, and then we're making a call and moving on. I guess maybe like sometimes what I'm most fearful of is just being sucked into this technology vortex of like either like whatever I'm doing is just benefiting some venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, as opposed to like my own internal needs and desires in some way. And I think whether I'm watching crap on Netflix for whatever they're churning at me, or I'm researching stuff endlessly on Yelp to see which place has the best tacos, either way, what I'm really doing is making some VC dude money because they've hijacked my attention. And so I'm trying to reclaim my attention from these rich leeches who are trying to frack it from me all the time.
Here's a question for you based on my own experience as well. Do you ever get a recommendation from a trusted source, a friend, a critic you like, or an assortment of them? The Hyatt, like, everyone seems to agree that this should be the kind of people that you like and recommend this, and then you start watching it or read it or whatever, and you don't get into it. Do you keep going because you're like, maybe I'm wrong, or do you take your own taste into account at a certain point? Because I sometimes do find it hard to be like, well, maybe I haven't gotten to the thing yet. Maybe I don't get it yet.
Well, so this may be where we differ. When there's something like that and I watch it and give it a chance and don't like it, I'm like secretly like thrilled. And I'm like, I just got like, what is this, 5 seasons of this show? That's like 70 episodes an hour. I just got 70 hours of my life back. I feel like I've been rewarded on some level when I don't like something, because I just start to feel like it's like a homework assignment, like all this crap that I'm supposed to watch all the time. But like that said, I do think so. With pandemic, I think has changed stuff a little bit. I do like there's a show called Le Bureau, this French like spy thriller. And I have like 3 different, people, not that I know personally, but like whose opinion I respect, are like, oh, I've gotten really into this spy thriller thing. And I'm like, okay, maybe this would be cool. And it's going to be like The Wire, but French. Awesome. And it's a lot more like some Tom Clancy movie, but French, which is fine, but it's like, I'm like, it's okay. I guess it's good for something French. I don't know. But like, I'm not like, and so I'm wrestling with that dynamic right now. Like, okay, I've almost through a season of this. Do I really want to keep going with it? And I'm leaning towards abandoning it.
Do you know one of the greatest gifts that Netflix has given us, or me at least, is even the concept of the queue. Like, I'm not always looking at it, but sometimes it just feels
Isn't
good.
Your queue boring? Isn't it like, I already saw that? Even though you haven't actually watched it, you already saw what it was and put it in your queue. And isn't that like how much of the equation, how much of the joy comes from having just done that?
Well, like I've bought more books than I've read, and
Right.
I've it feels good to buy a book thinking I'm going to read it, and then eventually I've gone through my girlfriend Rini, who I believe you know, she is very big into minimalism and minimizing. There's a book called what is it called? Goodbye Things, and it's about about the same end point of having advanced Marie Kondo, she says, like having the things like some people, like the writer of the book ends up with like hardly even like just a roll up mat for a bed and just like nothing in the space, nothing cluttering.
Very good.
I think you just saw you got me into James Clear, the most recent quotes that he sent out. I think he said something like agility is getting rid of physical clutter, clarity is getting rid of mental clutter, and tranquility is getting rid of spiritual clutter. And so I've gone through, I have all these books on my shelf that like some of them I'm like, if I had unlimited time, I would absolutely read this book. Some of them are, if I had limited time, I will absolutely read this book, or I intend to read this book. Some of them I really just want to read. Like the bookshelf is now like my book Netflix queue, and but having the concept of a queue, it like for my life, I'm like, what do I want in my day queue? I'm like, I want to at some days I'm like, get rid of or get through or get into certain emails, do certain writings, do certain listenings to music or podcasts, do certain creatings of songs or jokes, do certain phone calls with friends or family. Like, and so sometimes I'm like, we'll just have like
Now, is that
3 o'clock.
to-do list?
That's going to be music time.
Is that a to-do list though?
I have, I don't have it as a to-do list. I mean, the way that I start each day is with a kind of ritualized, like I wake up and I drink 1 liter of water in this container, which will be my first of 3 at least that I do during the day. While I'm drinking the water, my goal is to read something not online, to sometimes or listen to a book on an audiobook, usually something by Pema Chodron or Ram Dass or a spiritual teacher or writer. Sometimes a novel if I'm into a novel, but something that is peaceful and calming and not yet the storm scape of the internet. And so I do that, and then I meditate, and then I do my morning pages writing either by hand or typed on 700viewwords.com. And so the goal there is I read in this book by a guy named Alan Cohen about the formative minutes of the day, like your formative years of your life, what you get inputted in those first couple of years. What's that?
Do you meditate?
I do meditate.
In the morning?
Yes, I after
the water or after the morning pages?
Water first, then meditation.
And then morning pages.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, keep going. We have some comments and questions but I want you to finish your thought first.
Oh, sure. Just so those aren't like I like to think about, I don't know if we talked about descriptive versus prescriptive, like as far as how I figure out like who I am and how I live and what works for me on stage and in life and in relationships. Mm-hmm. The prescriptions that I have for myself come from descriptions of what works. I know that when I meditate in the morning, I enter the day the way that I want to. I know that when I drink water enough, I enter the day the way I want to. So I never think about it as, oh man, I have to do these things. Because I get to do these things. I want to do these things. So I never think about it as a to-do list, that even the things that, like, if I didn't pick up my guitar today, sometimes I'm like wistful about it. I'm like, oh, I wanted to, but I was doing other things that I wanted to do. Like, it's very rare for me to be spending, if I point my finger at any point on my calendar, anywhere on my day planner, like even just a little before we were doing this, I had like a busy day up till now. and I like just lay down for a minute, and that felt good and necessary. And I wasn't like, what should I be doing now? This is what I feel is good to be doing now. So I feel like to wrap up this segment of what I'm saying, the concept of the Netflix queue as applied to my life exists with things that it's not as hierarchical, other than there's like, 10 things that I like doing, some that I will do every day or almost every day, some that I will strive to do, if not every day, every couple days or once a week, or be like, oh, I haven't checked in with that friend or that guitar or, that that author, that book. But yeah, so it's all a matter of getting to do things rather than having to do things. But I do like the organizational structure of the queue as like a mental construct.
Yeah, no, I get that. The one thing that you said reminded me of a guy I know who doesn't believe in like long-term plans or any sort of 10-year plan or something like that, because he's like, then you're accomplishing, you're doing something that the person you used to be wanted done, as opposed to the person that you are now, which feels related to kind of the concept that you're talking about.
Oh yeah, I think, like with a lot of these things, I think there's a spectrum and there's a both, if possible. Like the same way, at the end of the year, like donate the amount of money that I plan to based on the percentage of however much I made during that year, but also during, I don't tell anyone specifically, I'm going to give at the end of the year. That doesn't help the person that I'm walking by asking for change. Like, they're not helped by my donating to fight malaria in Africa in December. So I'll also I'll make long-term plans, but I'll mainly look nowward as opposed to forward, or in addition.
Cool. Let's we have people leaving comments, so
please.
Let's take a look. So Dylan Axman wants to know, what's the name of the minimalist book called?
Goodbye Things.
Okay, cool. David Hayes, when we were talking about Thai restaurants, he wants us to know that he only goes to no Thai restaurants.
Oh, of course. Thank you, David. Also, here is the famous book that we just mentioned, one of the things that still lives in this home.
Shannon Savage asked, have you seen The Social Dilemma? Very good point you just made.
I have.
I have seen The Social Dilemma. I think it was making a lot of very good points, and I'm glad it's getting out there and people are paying attention to it. We just need more spotlight on it.
Oh, yeah, if I may, for people who don't know what The Social Dilemma is, it's a movie about how the big social media corporations are basically manipulating everybody out there except for me.
Which I will say, I think The Social Dilemma is a terrible name for that movie. I really wish they had given it something a little bit hookier or sexier or something. Just sounds like The Social Network, but more boring and like. But probably, I do feel like
they probably chose it because of its similarity and phonetic proximity to The Social Network, because they probably had some algorithm that was like, people will it'll light up the same cognitive part of their brain. The network will be lit up, and then they'll watch our movie because we want them to.
You could be onto something, and I think we're probably entering into a phase where things have really outrageous names and photos. Like there's a new movie coming out called Cocaine Hippos. And I think that's going to be more and more normal, because when you're trying to choose between a scroll of thousands of things on them, and one of them's called Cocaine Hippos, or has some crazy shot, I just think that's going to be a more and more common thing, that things are just going to have absurd, wait, what's that called? They put what in the title? Oh no. Let's see. Another Facebook user said, have you read about NFTs? I think that stands for non-fungible tokens, which are digital art that only one person can own, and it's like a thing now. I've seen it in headlines. I have not read about it because it sounds like crypto kitties or some other thing that I wish I had never heard of. But do you know anything about NFTs?
This is the first I've ever heard of any of those letters being put together.
Let's keep it that way for this chat. And someone else said, excuse me, could you two please start being hilarious for my amusement?
Uh, I mean, I feel like that's your responsibility, not you, Matt. I mean, it's everyone's response. Look, you don't. I wonder if that person is still watching, but I do want everyone to know, like, when I'm, first of all, this isn't specifically a comedy show, though I do understand we are comedians, and it is something that sometimes is expected of people. That's the thing. That's the problem with prescriptive and descriptive. People are like, you must be funny. I prescribe for you to be funny. And we're like, oh, we just want to do a different thing right now. But everyone is always free to leave a comedy show, and they're always free to stop watching whatever's on their screen. In fact, I mean, use Matt's very own wisdom. Like, if you're not enjoying what's happening now, aren't you thrilled that you have extra time in your life?
It's like you your life back by being not amusing. So you're welcome.
Oh yeah, it's like Thomas Edison famously said, I think, yeah, the 2000 times, the 2000 attempts to create the working light bulb that preceded the actual successful working light bulb, he doesn't see as failures. He sees as successful steps towards knowing how to make a light bulb by knowing what doesn't work, helping get him towards what does work. So perhaps this show could be a step towards you figuring out what show you do want to watch.
That's what we're here for, I read something recently that Thomas Edison was some sort of like patent thief and wasn't really like a brilliant inventor at all, and just sort of like stole other ideas from Tesla or other people. But these days, I don't know. It seems like we want to just hate on everyone from the past. So I can't always figure out who wasn't it. Was there just no one great ever? Is that where we're going to wind up?
I like Buddha, but
canceled.
I mean, I think we like stories, we like heroes, and also people like kind of like the same way we were talking earlier. Like, if there's a starving artist who isn't making it, and we're happy for their success, be like, yeah, make it. But then if they keep rising, get too close to the sun, like, hey, you're not giving enough of that away, then you're like, then you want their wings to burn, and for them to fall down. You do, not me. I want everyone to succeed. But I do think that there is, I think there's an Australian, I learned this from an Australian person, so I don't know if it's from Australian culture, but have you heard of like a tall poppy?
That they get cut down.
Yeah.
I've heard some phrase, but I forget it.
Yeah, I think it's like a tall poppy gets cut down because it's like rising too high above the shears as all the other ones are getting cut to an even level.
Well, I mean, it's something that interests me about, like everyone's always talking about, like, why can't we have healthcare like Scandinavia has? And I'm intrigued by, there's a concept in Scandinavia, I think it's called Janteloven or Jante's Law. And it's basically sort of like a cultural ethos that they have here about not wanting to stick out. So there, it's very frowned upon to be like flashy with your wealth, or to have like a really large home, or to be showing off. Like, it's much more about fitting in with your community. And this is like an ethos that's across Scandinavian countries. And so I always think when people are like, why can't we have Scandinavian healthcare? I'm like, okay, do we want to embrace the ethics and the values that go behind having a system like that, which is also on some level rejecting the idea of like worshiping wealth and flashy possessions? And
oh yeah, I think that'd be good too.
Lots of cars and like as a society, we kind of think that we should be able to cherry pick. Oh, let's just take that good thing without having to do like have that whole value system. And I'm not sure that's the way the universe works.
There's have you read anything by Ursula K Le Guin?
I've heard the name, but I don't think so.
Oh, I got into her in the past couple of years. She died recently, and was writing a lot of sci-fi, fantasy, but also nonfiction, and just really powerful, beautiful stuff. Since like around 1970, she wrote a novel called The Left Hand of Darkness, which is the first one I read. And in that book, it basically takes place on an alien world where everybody on the world has no gender most of the time, but every month they go through like a period that's kind of like heat, where they take on aspects of either maleness or femaleness, and one person could be male one month and female the next month, but it's and then that's when mating happens. But so some people might be a father to some children and a mother to another child, and this is like written in 19 like 69, 70, 71. So she's great, and she wrote this book called Always Coming Home, which is I think her father like worked as an anthropologist with like the indigenous folks in California in like the early 1900s, and so she wrote this sort of fictionalized version of a story about an indigenous people in like future California, like after some kind of maybe apocalyptic stuff. And anyway, in this culture, and I think that it's not unique to the culture that she is creating fictionally, but based on like real cultures that do and have existed, the concept of wealth was like this: that people who had stuff weren't considered wealthy. Wealth was considered, the people who were the wealthiest were the people that gave the most. So if you didn't have anything because you gave it all away, then you were the wealthiest. And I mean, the books that I've read by Peter Singer, like that one, the one that I mentioned earlier, and another one, like the concept of like when you give, you feel good. Like it for the most part across most human experience. Like there are sociopaths, there are situations where this doesn't apply, but for most people, like if like not just to say like indiscriminately to everyone all the time, but maybe there's some people who have like, you know, given away their entire fortunes and like live on $25,000 a year, live at the poverty line because because it brings them joy to get to live minimally. Like to the only thing that sparks joy for them is helping other people be able to have things. So I just like the concept of wealth as giving.
Yeah, well, I think you also get into, I think there's status is an interesting level or measurement or whatever you want to call it, where because like wealth, you can have status without wealth, which I think can be interesting too. Not that that's in itself going to satisfy you or make everything okay, but like sometimes we're measuring different things. Like someone like Mother Teresa may have had a lot of status but no wealth.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I don't think she was doing what she was doing for the status.
So, but okay, so then what was she doing it for? I agree with you, but then I'm trying to think of what, there's some word that I'm missing. Just for it was just the right, it was selfless. It was a completely.
I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to her intrinsic internal experience, but I do think that there are people who on a spectrum of, you know, doing things merely because it's a good thing to do. I mean, like certainly sometimes if I give money to somebody or something without anybody specifically knowing about it, it still might make me feel good. And that's not because I don't think it is status in that situation. Like,
no, but what do you think the right word is?
I mean, some of it might be ego.
Yeah.
Oh, Rini calls from the other room. Love. Yeah. So some people, I do think that some people are doing it out of a pure.
But it's so. I'm giving to the poor because love.
Yeah, because the definition of love in Buddhism, at least one, is a desire. The people that you love are the people for whom you desire their happiness to increase. And the definition of compassion is the people you're compassionate for is the people that you have a desire for their suffering to decrease. And so ultimately, like the farther you are towards Buddhahood, like the goal is to, you know, desire more happiness and less suffering for everyone, ultimately for yourself first, perhaps for your loved ones, for neutral people, eventually people that annoy you, eventually people that you hate, eventually all sentient beings, people that you don't know, people that you do know, everyone, animals, bugs, etc. And so I think that ultimately, I think it is possible. I'm not saying that it is achieved by most people. So I think that your curmudgeonly skepticism is certainly potentially earned and accurate in some situations. But I do think that just because it's hard for us to conceive of a person doing something purely because they want to alleviate someone's suffering, purely because they want to increase someone's happiness, I do think it is possible that there are people for whom that is their sole pure intent.
Yeah.
And
I
also,
agree. I mean, I'm thinking about like Zen monks. I'm certainly yeah. I mean, it's even if someone does nothing but give, they must be receiving something, or
or perhaps
why
they're
are
just
they?
a
Yeah,
channel. It's just coming through them and going out of them immediately.
yeah. Okay, cool. Well
There's
done.
a that's what we're working towards. That's the goal. There's a bit I've been working on and off throughout the pandemic
Do you think
about.
can I stop you for a second though?
Please,
The
of course.
goal is the goal loss of ego.
Mm. I think my understanding of like the Buddhism that I'm learning about, it involves like the goal of becoming enlightened. And the purpose of becoming enlightened is to help everyone else also along that path to ultimately be devoid of suffering and the roots of suffering, and only experience happiness and the root of happiness. And I do believe that I think that part of that process is like I think the one of the ultimate things that you learn, I think, along that path, from in my understanding intellectually, from having been taught about it, not having specifically experienced it, is that everything has no intrinsic self, that there is emptiness to everything, that the thing we think of as we mistake, that so much suffering comes from mistaking our conventional self that does exist with some kind of intrinsic underlying self which does not exist. Uh, and so the ego is, I think, associated with like that connection. With the ego is perhaps and this is, I'm now out of my depth, both psychologically and Buddhist knowledge wise, but I don't think I think that to say that the goal, like the goal in any step, is to like take one step in any position, take one step forward, be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, be kind to who's in front of you, be compassionate to who's in front of you. Like we can't get to the ultimate goal. Like, you can't learn calculus until you've learned to walk, perhaps, or to, algebra or arithmetic. So I at the stage I'm at, I'm like, just let's focus on increasing happiness, decreasing suffering, focusing on love and compassion as much as possible. And so yeah, to answer your question, long story long, I don't know. But the bit is sort of about this. I feel like my stereotype of Matt Damon is that he now has a company that helps people get water around the world. And so in the bit, I imagine people who are like, he's just doing that because he wants to keep being famous. And that's why, like, he wants the attention. And I feel like for the people, like, you don't want to support Matt Damon's ego water. And then there's somebody, starving, thirsty, some part of the world doesn't have water, and they're like, I'll actually take Matt Damon. Like, I don't care why he's doing it. I'd like some of that water, please.
Yeah, ego water sounds better than no water.
Oh yeah,
it actually does sound like a good name for a brand of water.
Yeah, maybe I'll tweet it at him.
So I'm trying to think if we have other stuff that we want to cover. Is there? I feel like we send email exchanges to each other fairly frequently.
Yes.
And sometimes you'll point out ideas that I've published online or said somewhere that maybe you have follow-up questions about. Yeah. I guess I'm curious. Am I special to be receiving emails like this? Do you send it to lots of people? And if so, how do other people respond to your queries?
Great question. So I used to, I'd say, let's say for simplicity's sake, argue with people online a lot. And now I have, Goodbye Things style, Marie Kondo style, like found that it didn't always spark joy. Especially when, and I've also recently started with my Buddhist friend Gus learning about Tibetan debate. We're reading this book right now, Debate in Tibetan Buddhism. And one of the things that's true about this paradigm is that for an argument to be valid in Tibetan debate, it must be wanted. Both people must be like mutually agreeing that a debate is happening and agreeing on the terms of the debate. Like you could be telling somebody the truth, but if they're not asking you for it, if they're not looking for it, then in this paradigm, the argument is not valid, even if it's true. And so,
again, if yeah, repeat that last part.
sure, if I could tell you a true thing, I think that I'm presenting you a valid argument, but it has to be desired. It has to be invited. It has to be asked for in order for it to be considered valid in this structural framework.
Like a vampire has to be invited in.
Exactly like a vampire.
My ideas are like vampires. You must invite them into your mind.
And so this, going back to when I used to be like if I sometimes would put on Facebook years ago, a joke about politics, a joke about something I believed. And if it like went viral enough that people were sharing it beyond my friends, beyond my fans, then every once in a while, there would be like a slew of people or some people like arguing, presenting. If I was presenting, something that leaned socialist, there would be people that would argue something leaning libertarian. And so sometimes people would be aggressive. Sometimes people would be, mean. But I would always come at it like initially just like, can we have a meeting of the minds? And sometimes the answer seemed to be no. But years ago, that didn't stop me. Now I'll respond to you to anybody if anybody responds to one of my posts with like a question or something that seems like it could lead to what could be a productive conversation, I'll engage once. And if they don't seem like they are engaging in the same good faith, way where like we're both humans striving to figure this out together.
There's a lot of assumption of bad faith going on online that I find fairly unbearable.
Oh yeah. And so now it's so much, I feel so much better just like either muting them or hiding it or.
Well, related to that, what I've done a lot is like I'll invite someone to be like, hey, here's my email. Do you want to talk about this? Or if you want to hop on a call and discuss, which is almost never taken up on. But also I'm just like, okay, I don't think you really want to exchange ideas. You're here to like showboat online or to dunk on me or whatever. And like, okay, that's cool. Yeah. But I'm not going to fight with some avatar.
I also have sometimes had nice experiences when people have reached out to me privately when I invited them to do so. So it is nice to know, like sometimes it is just a person having a bad day or a bad moment or being drunk for a second. And then I feel like Mulaney and Pete Holmes used to have a thing where they would respond to people by being like, I'm a human, And so I like human connection. And so with you, you are one of the few people who I feel like you're in my, circle of friends. You're my friend. And I do like, and we agree about so much in so many like large, I'd say like, zooming out, we're very similar. But then that's what makes it so much more interesting when we zoom in. And, for example, one of the things that I thought we might talk about here, like when you shared, and I feel like, when you're writing, it is when you're sharing your newsletter, it's some combination of comedy and real true thoughts that you have. Like some of it's not intended to be funny, some of it is intended to be funny, and some of it sort of, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but that's what seems to me. And so when I think that you're making a legitimate point, and if it's a legitimate point that I see another angle to, I am fascinated and intrigued and feel comfortable reaching out to you because I think that you will be open to us having this kind of back and forth.
I'm a fan of dialogue and disagreement and an exchange of ideas.
Oh yeah. So the one that sprung to mind recently was where you're writing this mid-pandemic or late pandemic, hopefully, and there was a few articles that you'd seen and comedians talking about sort of the concern that live performance might not return to the same way that it was before, or optimally, in part because of all of these technologies that have sprung up or advanced during the pandemic to make things like what we're doing right now possible, your various Zooms and so forth. And now that people are able to do shows for people all over the world, from their home, will there still be people who are interested in leaving their home to come see live comedy performance? And I think that there's going to be like a hybrid improvement, like the best of both, that the old system and the new system are parents, and we're like, oh, let's raise our cyborg children, of live performance future, which is already happening. I think Alex Hooper is a comedian I know who just sent out a mailing today that's like, live performance is coming back. Here are some shows that I'm doing, and this venue is live streaming all of my headlining sets, so you can see them from your home, or you can come to the club if you are in Nebraska or wherever it is, which I've never actually been a huge fan of, being in a club where they're live streaming everything to people's homes, because I kind of like the idea of curating an album or a special or a recording ultimately, and that everything up until that point is sort of, mushing around paint on the palette.
Yeah.
But it will be possible, and it is happening.
So I think on the one hand, I do think post-pandemic there will be, I don't want to say a boom, or I don't know what the right framing is, but like people will desperately want to gather in public spaces again. I think it will be a great time for DJs and for comedians, and there will be athletes. There are going to be places where people are hungry to congregate again. But I think on some level, this idea of what we've experienced of working from home after the pandemic, does everything go back to the way it was before? I think the answer is no. I think a lot of people have gotten a taste of what it's like to work from home, are going to want to continue to do it, if not 5 days a week, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. I'm not sure offices will ever be the same again. I'm also not sure if offices aren't ever the same again, are cities ever the same again? Is this leading to a spread of people over a more diverse geographical area? What impact does that have on comedy clubs and cities and restaurants and other things like that? I think there's a lot of stuff happening after this pandemic that, like, I certainly don't think I know how it's going to shake out, but I do think there is sort of a change. And one of the things that I see shifting is this level of comfort, and maybe there's some ageist stuff here too, of young people being, growing up in this environment of just being like living your life online, this sort of like, whatever like virtual reality is, but like your entire life can be led from your bedroom nowadays, of like, you can work, you can perform, you can do everything and not even have to leave your apartment all day. And we're getting increasingly comfortable with that. And it's in many ways sort of approved of by society at large. And to me, on some level, it's got the undercurrents of this real sort of dystopian nightmare where we're all just sort of competing in this video game for likes and like, GoFundMes and Patreons and Substacks, and, missing out on like the sort of the thorny stuff of actually like leaving our homes and getting into a room together and being around one another. And I'm concerned about that, but I don't think I necessarily know exactly how it's all going to shake out. But I do think that there's a stew, a bubbling cauldron, a stew that's being stirred, and I'm kind of worried about how it tastes when it actually gets poured in my cup.
I have a gentle, fun impression of you based on what you just said. Here it is. If I may, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that I'm concerned. So,
well, you got a lot of concerning elements, like climate change. I don't know exactly what's going to happen either, but I am concerned.
Well, that I think is different than this in this way. I think I forget if we talked about this or if I saw you write somewhere. You've watched the Fran Lebowitz Netflix series?
I've watched 2 or 3 episodes of it.
I think it's in one of the last episodes. I'm sorry to spoil. Like, I mean, I feel like she
Let, let,
is
let me guess, she's a little curmudgeonly about something.
she's a flavor that you might like, but you might be surprised to find out like when she was asked a question about like, young people on their phones, on their screens, like, do you think that that's heading in a negative direction? I forget how it was, but she's like, no. She's like, when I was a kid, my father was like, we didn't have TVs. I'm like, yeah, but I do. So it's like, she's like, I understand that kids today have things that we didn't have when we were kids, and that like people might have been just as concerned. Socrates was concerned about the written word rotting the mind and the memory. I think is from a
And
Joe Zimmerman
I'm
joke.
definitely, like, in general, I'm a big fan of like old people are uptight, just get out of the way. The kids will figure out it's going to be fine. And I am worried we're crossing some threshold of like, I'm not sure things are going to be fine. I don't like, unless there's some sort of revolution. Like, again, to go back to, I just feel like we're being manipulated so much by these tech companies, and that our lives are sort of being sucked into this vortex. And unless we figure out some way to fight back, I mean, to go back to the social dilemma and a lot of stuff that Jared Lanier, I think his name is talking about, and like, I think that there's some really like dangerous, nefarious things going on that are not just like, oh, now we have TV. I think it's like, oh, now we're undermining democracy. Oh, now no one agrees on the truth. Oh, now like we're splitting off into tribes that are unable to compromise with each other, and the inevitable result will be civil war. Like, those things aren't great. Like, those are like alarming in a way that like I think it's healthy to have a conversation about. To then
I've got
look,
a
old
few.
man, you just don't get it. Get out of the way. Us kids will be fine. Like, all right.
I've got a few things to say to this. Number one, I was responding to your saying that young people might not come out to shows because they're on their phones all the time. Uh, that was what my response was based in, not all of society and the world will be fine, so be quiet, old man. So I feel like your
Fair
response right there was something
I may have exaggerated.
that I wasn't saying
I
at
may have
all.
turned you into a caricature.
And there's Chris Duffy has a new podcast, How to Be a Better Human, I think it's called, with in combination with TEDx. And he has on experts. The very first one is about an expert in how to talk with people that you disagree with politically. And one of the things that was really great about it is that it talks about the fact that that there is actually not as big a divide in what people believe. Like in the like certainly there are people who don't accept all of the same facts, that people aren't receiving all of the same news. I'm not saying that there is only cause for optimism, but I'm saying in response to your response to the caricature of me, that there is also some cause for optimism because there is research being done. There is science available. There are possibilities. And I feel like this might be a great place to, this would be great if I ended on this, but one thing that we can do individually in order to stop the nefarious plot of social media tech companies to, just steal our attention and use it to their purposes is let's stop being on the phone. Let's stop being on the device. I mean, like, be on it less, you don't even, instead of viewing everything that everybody recommends to you, you could be like, I recommend to myself a day of no screens or no screens until this time. What's that?
What if you're a junkie?
I mean, then I think you need help.
Well, what if I think we as a society are junkies?
I mean, then I think that the only thing that you can impact is your own individual experience. And if you think that you're okay, then great. And if you think that you could benefit from living in a different way, then I think that you can do that.
What about other people? Just give up on them? Or be the change I want to see in the world?
Yeah, I mean, offer people, like, if you want to, when we can meet again in real life, safely and healthily, if you think it would be optimal for people to gather in public, to as friends at a party, at a comedy show, I would encourage you to invite people to live the way that you want to, and like you we can't individually solve all of the problems of the world, but we can start in our own life and then, yeah, live in ways and talk about the ways. I mean, with our platforms, either online or in person.
Well, let me ask you, like,
Yeah.
as pandemic has rolled on, more and more comedians are doing live streams like this, doing multiple podcasts, uh, GoFundMe's and Patreon, maybe not GoFundMe, Patreon stuff, and after pandemic, what do you see as the future of comedy? Because I guess for me, it's all those things have shifted the soil, the terrain of comedy in some way that clearly different fruit or trees or whatever this analogy calls for will blossom from it afterwards. I'm curious what you see for like the landscape or the ecosystem of comedy as people have moved so much of their efforts to the online realm, and how that will impact everything afterwards, or will it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've been on a constant progression. Like, comedians in the 80s probably couldn't have foreseen Twitter and, wanting to have a social presence online. And I mean, this
I think
app
we
that
know
we're on right.
comedians from the '80s who are upset about it now.
Oh, sure. I mean, I do think that the thing here's the that'll I think hopefully this will link a thing from earlier and now, that like our transitions are hard. When things like it's difficult, like puberty is hard, turning from a child to an adult is hard, like becoming maintaining not relevance, but like is sort of a working knowledge of like, oh, if you're a comedian, if you start out being a comedian now, maybe you're like, oh, I'll get this Twitter, I'll get this thing going. Like maybe you and I are like, is TikTok important? I don't think so. But is it helpful? Maybe if you do things that could be used on it. Do you have to? Like I've known comedians who never had a website, and I'm sure there are comedians that will thrive without TikTok. I'm happy to be doing it mainly. And I do think that there'll be more opportunities like for people. If there's going to be the same way that there have been like YouTube stars who then like sell out a comedy club based on their YouTube fans coming to see it, like that will happen and versions of that will happen. And I think that it's all that is potentially good. The more landscape there is with opportunity on it for people to create things either live or online, I agree with you. I think it will change, and this aspect of it, I'm excited by it. I do think we should do our best to protect democracy and the planet and individual human lives. And I don't want to completely dismiss everything that you're saying as Chicken Little, old man, the sky is falling, but I am I guess I feel like our logo could be the happy smiling mask and like the comedy tragedy masks. We're like, hey, there's some stuff that's gonna be bound to be good about this, and you're like, but what about this? There's some stuff that's bound to be like this. So I'm just for the things that I don't know, I'm optimistic. For the things that I know that are worth being concerned about, I'm not saying I'm optimistic about everything blindly. But
I guess the technology and the impact that's having on us is what I'm not optimistic about, and it's based on what I've seen over the past 20 years and what technology is doing to us. And the more we're letting ourselves be sucked into this vortex that makes money for Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Jack at Twitter and all these other people, with no regulation, and sort of what we see in the social dilemma and what we can just witness on our own, that
well,
like it's challenging for me to like see it as a positive. Like there's two sides, let's see how it all shakes out, when I'm pretty sure it's shaking out in a way that enriches them at the expense of society. And
two things.
to me, it's more akin to climate change than it is to like now we have TVs or something. It's like, oh, this is something that is like damaging us, and unless we speak up and fight back about it, it's going to keep getting worse.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm for speaking up and fighting back about it. And also, one thing I saw today, I didn't. I saw a headline and read a snippet that Biden is like for Amazon workers being able to unionize, and that is good. Like, hopefully they will. Hopefully, the massive money that Bezos makes for Amazon will go to the people that work for Amazon that bring us all the things that we want immediately, streaming, experience wise, or object wise to our home. And just another, I understand you're thinking about the macro level, but also I read this study a couple years ago that people were like, is technology bad for kids? Is having screens, having your kid watch screens bad? And the answer was basically like, it depends what they're watching and how they're watching it. That it's a tool like any tool, and that if a parent is, curating their experience with educational content, then it's helpful. And if a parent is using it as a babysitter just all day, then it's not helpful. And so we can, as individuals, curate our own experience to the best of our ability, not get sucked into the vortex as frequently and as extensively as we are capable of, if we can avoid it. And then also, like you're saying, speak up and help spread the information that you have, that we have, to let people know that they can be voting and putting forth ways forward to make it so that things are more equitable and democratic.
Yeah, I think we're still in like the awareness stage of trying to get people to recognize everything. That's because like that Social Dilemma movie, that's stuff that I think everyone knows. And then you see a movie like that go viral, and everyone's like, "Oh, shocked! Like I had no idea." And you're like, "Oh, we don't even realize what's happening to us or what we're doing." So I think, somewhere we can come together is on this idea of like an awareness of what's happening is always a good first step. As
Gaining awareness, I like it, and I've been happy to be sucked into the vortex of this conversation as much as we have.
Yeah, I think we have a few more comments, and then maybe we can close plugging our newsletters sort of thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
So let me backtrack on the comments. Thanks to everyone for commenting and watching. David Hayes says, after drinking a liter of water, all I can meditate about is getting to the bathroom. Shannon Savage liked the whole don't have a 10-year plan because you're just you're accomplishing something for the person you used to be notion. She said, me at 40 does not have the same goals as me at 30.
Yeah.
Which sounds healthy and good. Well done. What else? Please read the story of George Price. So apparently we need to read the story of George Price. I don't know.
All right.
David Hayes said there was an old ad. If you buy a pizza, you get one free. And the person says, I can't accept a free pizza, so I'll pay for two. And the other person says, then you get four. Then I'll pay for four. The giver gets. I didn't really get it, but okay.
Well, you have to give, and then you'll get. Yeah.
Yeah. Mike Elmore says, this is my dream threesome. These two men with me at a table talking politics. Thanks,
Mike.
Yeah. I feel like there's other threesomes to consider as your ultimate dream, but like,
this is the dream.
Mix. This is it. Okay. What else? From outside our culture, would it be strange to see the focus of media to be on a single injured athlete when there are 500,000 dead? I don't know if that's necessarily our culture. I feel like, people worship famous people and celebrities and royalty and all that kind of stuff. It's just, I think it's a universal thing. Maybe not the right way to be, but how it is. And someone said a drag comedy show for you called Welcome to the Mism. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching. Maybe, how about I'll plug you?
Oh, sure.
Mike has a new newsletter called Art Nuggets. We're back. I don't know. I got cut off. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
It's as someone doesn't want me to plug you, I guess. Yeah, newsletter, Art Nuggets. You go to, what is it, mikekaplan.substack.com. Is that right?
That is it.
MYQ. And it's interesting things that you found and links. And you are a very talented wordsmith who is able to write briefly in interesting ways. And I think the newsletter is a cool forum to watch you do that. You also have stand-up album called AKA that is very enjoyable. I listened to on a run through Carroll Gardens months ago and enjoyed it. And there's some good talk of ayahuasca, which we are both fans of. So if you've never heard of ayahuasca, look it up, do some research. It's this great medicine that more people should know about. And yeah, MikeKaplan.com for more information.
Oh, yeah. And I'll say that Matt has a newsletter called The Rubes Letter, full of jokes and thoughts and more. It's longer form than mine, as I think is apt for our comedy styles, though you wouldn't know it from my talking style out loud right now. But yeah, always thought-provoking things about culture, politics, comedy, jokes as well. And Matt has a special for free on YouTube that I watched and enjoyed very much. It's stand-up intercut with some documentary style slices of Matt's life and thoughts. Some ayahuasca stuff in there too, briefly. And I enjoyed it very much. I didn't watch it while I was on a run, but I did. That would have been dangerous, but I did enjoy it while sitting in my home. And it is. What is the name of it?
Feels like Matt Ruby.
That's right. It does. Aptly named.
Thank you. Yeah, also available as an album. But yeah, mattruby.substack.com or Feels Like Matt Ruby are those two things. But yeah, I enjoyed doing this. We'll have to do it again sometime, Mike.
Yeah, always a pleasure to talk and commune with you, my friend. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks everyone for watching. All right, I'm ending the broadcast. Bye.
Bye.